people did you get out of poverty this year? And that can be difficult because circles and as folks who are experiencing poverty have ups and downs and 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It takes a while, and not everybody completes who starts circles, completes circles. So if a Young Circles Initiative program is going to hit 30% of the people who start 3 years ago, to have them reach 200% of the federal poverty level, that's huge. It's almost like a batting average. But if somebody is not familiar with circles and they say, oh, you know what, why isn't it 75%? Because we're just using that metric of the income, that you need to be prepared to manage those expectations and discuss those. So we talk about how much public assistance they're not on, how they've improved their education, how they've decreased their debt, how they've improved their confidence, these different areas, rather than just focusing on that one metric. And then again, this ties back to be yourself, but also to manage expectations, be transparent. Know your weaknesses, but you don't have to parade them out there in front of everybody. But know what they are, and you probably know what your weaknesses are in your organization because you're in the weeds and you're dealing with those weaknesses all the time. But be transparent, be confident, and know what those are. So Heather, you turn the next slide.
Next slide.
Yes, please.
Okay, can you hear me? Agency partnerships.
Yes.
How to get a second date.
Oh wait, wasn't there a meme?
Oh yes, can you see it?
There it is. Okay, I'm gonna wrap my section up with this. It says here, if you think losing your spouse is like when your cat died, and then it's like, it's none of my business. And there's a reason why I put this slide in here. And it's because sometimes what happens is 2 reasons. People they'll try their best to relate to your mission, but sometimes maybe what you're doing is like losing a spouse has that weight. Now, granted, I have never had a cat die. This is the first cat that I've ever lived with. And so I haven't had that happen, but I know I love pets and things like that. And so here's somebody trying to relate, but they haven't had that experience of losing the spouse. So one thing that I would suggest too is talking to people. Let's see, find something that's truly relatable to the people in the community you want to work with. So for example, with homelessness, they may not know somebody who's living under an overpass, but they may know a family that's doubled up, or they may know somebody who's struggling paycheck to paycheck, who's this close to being evicted or losing their housing. So being sensitive to trying to get that relatable experience, visiting with donors, visiting with volunteers to see if there's a way to have a shared idea, so it isn't like the spouse and the cat. So, all right, Heather, your turn.
Okay, agency partnerships, or how to get a second date. So how do you form partnerships with agencies that may be competing for money? And how do you leverage those agency partnerships to gain more resources? So a problem, if I help another agency who's competing for the same money, am I damaging my chances? Or if I do my roommate's makeup and she looks cute, will my date ask her out instead? It's never happened to me, but it happened to my roommates in college sometimes, although it wasn't me that was asked out, it was other roommates. I was busy playing video games. Solution. In the Mountain Land Continuum of Care, we found that when we work together, specifically on state or federal grants, we created more funding requests than we had when we competed. We received more money. We created more programs. So one of the things that is really tough to do sometimes when you're competing for those resources is to sit down and have a conversation about what's going on in your agency, what's going on in your community. I love something that Karen said in her message about partnerships, that when people call up her agency and say, hey, can we do a blanket drive for her? She doesn't just say, oh no, I'm sorry, we don't accept blankets. She says, take them to so-and-so, they do blankets. Oh, you want to donate clothes? Well, we can't take those, but this agency can. That is a great way to start forming those relationships with other agencies in your area. And the truth is that we're not all going to get along. And the truth is that sometimes we have egos. That is a thing. We all have egos. But you don't go into the nonprofit world for any other reason than to make the world a better place. And when you have these honest discussions and sometimes vulnerable discussions with other agencies in your community, you can really make kind of magic happen sometimes. So I'm going to brag on Karen's organization a little bit. We sat down last round of state funding. We called all of the players to the table, like everybody that's going to apply for money, and said, how much are you applying for? What are you applying for it for in your agency? And so we talked about like who was going to ask for what money and how we were going to use it, how it fit into our strategic plan, how we would prioritize it among ourselves if we had to prioritize it. And then we asked sort of this golden question, and honestly, magic. What are we missing in our community? So we went around and said, what is missing for you? Service gaps. What would be the biggest help for your organization? If we were to think outside the box here, what would help you the most? And with this conversation that sort of, it was like popcorn, boop, 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 all over the place. We found out that we're having difficulty unilaterally engaging with landlords and finding landlords willing to take vouchers, willing to work with survivors of domestic violence, willing to work with people that had less than stellar records or less than stellar credit. And so around the table, we said, okay, what would a position that served all of us sort of look like? What would this landlord engagement position look like? And we talked about what it would do, maybe what it wouldn't do, what the priority would be, what the low-hanging fruit is, if you will. Like we determined it's easy, it's fairly easy if you're going to look at housing someone chronically homeless versus a veteran survivor of domestic violence. That's an easier person to house than someone chronically homeless. That's just easier. So we formed these partnerships and the arrangements and said, okay, which agency has the capacity to house this program? And Community Action stepped up and said, if we get funding for this and with support from you here and you here, we can create this position, we can monitor this position, we can do reporting on this position, we'll hire for this position. And they hired somebody that's just like amazingly dynamic. He just gets crap done. And it's really something that was completely born out of this discussion with agencies. What are we missing? And sort of taking that approach, we have found that not only are agencies willing to come to the table with transparency and with vulnerability too, they're coming with their thinking caps on, and we're finding ways to make our community a better place. And then to follow up on the dating story, if your date asks out your roommate in front of you, he's, well, a pig. Karen, you're up.
All right. Let's assume that he did not ask your roommate out. Asked you. You are dating. You have told your story. You've been yourself. You like what you see. He likes what he sees. And you're in a committed relationship now. So what happens now? So we're going to talk about those that you've been in a committed relationship with. So who are your key stakeholders? And then how do you engage with other key stakeholders? And then a question that's always on my mind is, how do you get your board to engage? So, all right, Nick, go to the next slide. So I did put, if those of you who read my bio, you'll, excuse me, you'll see that I put a Pink Floyd reference in this page, but we'll get to it. because it's a song that I keep thinking about but first of all, you're in that stakeholder, you've got your stakeholders. I get asked this question is who do you work with in the community? How do you get word out? How do you get word out about your services? Now, granted, the network of clients that we serve, there's a word of mouth network that happens. But another network that we have is with other organizations that not only do some of the same things we do, but organizations that do completely different things. So looking at that is how building those stakeholder relationships, who's already doing what you're doing. We talked about this a few minutes ago. And then am I duplicating what's being done? But building that, really talking to your clients, you can see where they're going, with other places they might be going to, other services they're accessing. You can talk to other organizations. For example, there's an organization we work with that does they do some of the same services, the food provision services that we do. And we were talking to them, I was talking to them and I was discussing with them what one of our funders does. And they had never gone to this funder before. And so I knew that this funder would be willing to help, that it would be a non-competitive type of situation. It was a matter of just connecting this organization with this funder, and the funder they would commit to helping them, I would imagine. I don't know what the outcome was, but helping, referring, and being a true partner with those other organizations. It really, like Heather said, yeah, ego gets in it, but I found that really a genuine desire to partner goes a long way. I mean, it's money is important because that's what pays the bills, but also developing that goodwill is really important as well. And building as well, there are referral networks that currently exist in the state that you may or may not be part of. And a couple that come to mind are the Department of Workforce Services sends us referrals. They send us a list of those that they have referred to us for other services besides what they provide. And then Intermountain is creating what's called, well, I know it as Unite Us. And it's a network, it's based on the social determinants of health, and connecting and trying to see those interactions between and providing referrals for medical patients, those receiving legal aid, mental health services. We as providers outside those fields don't see who those clients are. But also a doctor could be sitting in his or her office and click on a button, say, I'm referring you here to Community Action because it sounds like you might need help with your rent or your food. Or they might, okay, well, for mental health services, here's Wasatch Mental Health. They're the organization in Utah County. So there's this database that's being started, that's being developed right now. It's been in existence, I would guess, for 6 or 8 months, the one through Intermountain. DWS's database, I don't know how long it's been in existence, but it's another one as well. So you can build those referral networks to keep your stakeholder, your partner organizations informed. So two other areas too about building. Well, first, the second one's keep talking. I'm gonna move on. Keep talking. There's a song by Pink Floyd. This is all, the little automated voice says all you need to do is keep talking. And communication to not only those partner organizations, but to your donors. You're getting regular reports saying, because your donation, we were able to help this many people this quarter. Keeping up on that. Newsletters, social media, things like that. Very easy ways for you to get the word out for your volunteers as well. We have just that communication. We have opportunities for volunteers. Right now, they're very limited because of COVID, but we like ideally groups of 10 to 20 people that can come in on an evening or something like that to help in our food pantry. Sometimes we'll get, well, I remember I've gotten an email, one time I got an email from a from someone trying to plan a service project for 200. And we were unable to, on our site, we're not able to have 200 people show up and help. But we have opportunities, and we put that information on our website where they could do something off-site that would benefit us, and then we can use it on site. Also, talk to your client groups. Find out what they need. They're stakeholders as well, the ones receiving the services. I'm going to, in the next point under don't let the problem start to begin with, talk a little bit about our board and the relationships that we have there. And so in fact, I'll just segue over to that. Our board, we're a community action agency. And so by federal law, we're mandated to have at least a third of our board of trustees be those of low income. So we have relationships with organizations that serve low income families. And in our policies and procedures, it talks about how we will connect with Head Start. And in fact, community action agencies their low income individuals have to be democratically selected. So the Head Start Parent Council will call for letters of interest, and then they'll choose somebody and then put that name forward. And then we point them to the board. And that ties into don't let the problem start to begin with. And that means get a board filled with those who understand and share your passion for your mission. And that's what I really, really appreciate our tripartite board. Our board is at least a third low income, a third public sector, so elected officials are their designees, and a third private sector. A lot of times you'll see organizations who want to help those who are in tough times, and the board is made up of people who might have the money and they might have the connections, and that's very, very important. But it's also important to draw upon those people who are having the lived experience. Again, it goes back to that meme. If you're going to want to go help, if you want to help people whose spouses have passed away, you might want to talk to those who are widowed. And because they have experiences that those who have not experienced that have had. So have that. Get your board members. Let's see. So also give your board specific responsibilities. I serve on a number of boards, and there's one board that I serve on. It's the Family Support and Treatment Center here in Orem. And what really drew me to them too is that their mission, part of their mission is to provide mental health services for families. And if I hadn't had the own experience of having to obtain mental health services for my family, I would not have the same feeling for it or the same passion. So finding people who share that, who are willing to work depending on the nature of your board. Some are working boards where you divide into subcommittees, and that's what we do at Family Support and Treatment Center. Is we each are on a subcommittee to help support the organization, or have them be involved in other ways as well. So, all right, Heather, back over to you. You're muted.
Thanks. I never do that. I'm on Zoom meetings like all the freaking time. I never do that. Okay. Service gaps, marriage counseling 101. So we're going to talk a little about what to do if you're not getting what you need from your relationships. How do you fill the needs in your community with limited resources? And how do you find out what the unmet needs are in your community? So first I want to talk about what happens if your needs are not being met. What happens if you have a specific need for a specific volunteer and it's not being met? Or you have a need for a specific food item and it's not being met? What do you do? How do you reach out to your partnerships to look for help? And so I'm going to suggest a few ways on this. The first thing that I'm going to suggest is reach out to your LHCC. One of the things, I read a story years ago, and I don't know if it's true, I just read it, about a wealthy family that lived next door to a family in poverty. And the family in poverty borrowed things from the neighbor a lot. Do you have any eggs? Do you have a garden hose I can borrow? Can I borrow your lawnmower? Do you have any cinnamon? You know, there's sort of this constant borrowing from the low income neighbor to the higher income neighbor. And one day the higher income neighbor went next door and said, can I borrow some pepper? And the low income family comes out with this jug of pepper, you know. And the little girl talks to her mom about borrowing, and she says, Mom, we have lots of pepper. Why are we borrowing pepper? And she said, I want them to know that they are capable of filling things that we may need. And I want them to know that it's okay for them to ask us for things that they might need. And I thought that was a really profound sort of thing to do. And she said specifically, I wanted to ask for something I knew would not burden them and would be small enough that it was not going to inconvenience them. It was not going to be something that they were going to miss, that they were going to suffer because of. This is an interesting thing that you can apply sort of in an intra-agency sort of way. One of the things that builds relationship is sort of this mutual respect and this mutual push and pull. And I don't know my neighbors. I've lived in my house for like a year and I don't know my neighbors, but you know, COVID, it's a thing. But it sure makes my heart just a little happy when they call and say, hey, do you have an egg I can borrow? And if I have an egg, I am so happy to give it to them. I'm like, here, take 5, take 6. I have lots of eggs, take some eggs. As agencies, we can rely on one another for some of our smaller needs. Again, talking about what Karen said, that she refers people with blankets. One of the things that I have loved during COVID is that my responsibilities have shifted a little as a collaborative applicant. I have gotten to run emergency supplies all over creation. It's been amazing. It's like literally my best day. I load up my little car and I just zip out and take masks or gloves or whatever. I love it when an agency has called me and said, hey, I have extra masks. Can I give you these extra masks so that you can take it to an agency that may not have it? Or when I've had an agency that's asked for gloves and I've said, I don't have any of those, but I know an agency that does. And getting to facilitate those relationships and build those relationships and also fill the needs that are popping up. When I worked as a direct service provider, that was something I was conscious of a lot, was if my organization didn't have it, who could I call that might be willing to help me with it, that might have access? Or conversely, I worked at an agency that worked with just adults, and we would get diapers in and it would be, okay, which agency can I offer these to because we don't need them? So think about your network in terms of that relationship building, give and take. The second thing, in reaching out to your LHCC leadership, because your LHCC leadership can also help facilitate these relationships. They might actually have a better sense of what the needs are and what the excess are in your community than you do, or they can use a mailing list and get that out there. They can also use their social media. I think most of the LHCCs have got either a mailing list or some type of social media that can push those needs out for you. I work with a dental nonprofit when we're not closed for COVID. And one of my favorite things is to get calls from agencies that have said, hey, I had a dentist call me the other day looking for volunteer opportunities, and they just wanted to sort cans, but I mean, dude, they're a dentist. So they refer the dentist to me that he can or she can use their skills and help in a very direct sort of way. So being kind of aware of our neighbors and what our neighbors' needs are is kind of a really impactful thing to do. And then how do we meet those needs how do we fill those gaps in a community that has very little resources? I know in Utah County, we have a lot of volunteers. And I know that not all counties have got that kind of volunteer force. Some of y'all just don't have the bodies that we've got in Provo. I mean, we're packed in there. Make connections with organizations that have people of goodwill. One of the things that I love in Utah County that we have that brings in some volunteers that you may not expect is the Interfaith Council. We've got representatives from all of the organized religions in the area, and they send out monthly mailers, they send out through their social media opportunities, they send out all of these things recruiting people to fill these specific needs. And when we can reach out to them and say, we have a specific need in our community for this, that's usually filled pretty quickly. And I know even in smaller communities, less populated communities, look for organizations, look for schools, look for PTAs, look for religious organizations, look for government associations that can help you get that word out about what your specific needs are. And this also goes a long way to meeting your needs in sort of a long-term way, because you're educating people that are influential in your community about what you're doing, what your needs are, and what the problem is. One of the things that we struggle with in Utah County is kind of a lack of understanding that there is a significant poverty and homelessness issue in our community. I don't know if y'all deal with that, but we deal with that here. It's sort of a homelessness is a Salt Lake problem. We don't have homeless here in Utah County. And of course, you know, whatever. But by recruiting these influential members of your community, influential caring members of your community, they can tell your story and they can help get your needs met in a way that you might not have the reach to do so. I'm going to go ahead and move along a little bit too. So communication is key when you're looking at filling your needs. Talking with your partners about the gap in services and your unmet needs. And like we said, look for new outlets to get your needs met. Like in a marriage, it's rarely possible for one person to meet every single one of your needs. You may just need more friends. And in our communities across Utah, we know that we have people who care, and we have people that are looking for a cause to rally behind. Make friends and get more people on your side and more people advocating for you. I used to work, I had a mentor that had worked in nonprofit where he worked in the business world as well. And I used to stress out about fundraising because I'm a stress out sort of person, if you don't know that already about me. And I remember him kind of putting his hand on my shoulder once. He's like, Heather, calm down. He's like, this sells itself. If you can tell the story, this sells itself. People care and they want to help. They just need to be given an opportunity to come in and help. They don't know what to do. It's not that they don't want to be involved. It's that they don't know how to be involved. And if you can frame in your story on how they can help you and how they are needed, you're going to meet those needs in a better way. Any questions? We've got a little bit, we've got a lot of time for questions. So I hope that you have a lot.
You know what, Heather? One thing we did not talk about is, while they're thinking of questions, is how to destroy the relationship. And part of me just says, do the opposite of what we don't talk about, badmouth your community partners, whine to your donor, you know, just, or whatever, you know, anyway, I don't think we need to go a whole lot of detail about that, but I just thought about that and thought, oh.
Did y'all want to know more about how to destroy things?
Yeah, we can talk about how to destroy it. Submit a financial report that's really messed up, that's accidentally, but not that I would know from experience.
Social media, that's a good way to destroy things.
That's sometimes a good way to destroy a relationship.
Some of us get a little heated sometimes. We got to take a step back. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. So, are there any questions or comments or anything?
Or anything we didn't answer, or any problems that you're puzzling over? This might be a great place to get more minds involved if you're puzzling over a question.
And even if it's about a relationship, like a real.
Karen. I can give you bad advice.
No, don't ask me.
all my roommates are married. Every roommate I ever had, I think, except for one, is married, and I had like 20 something. So you can come room with me for a couple of months and you'll get married. So.
Oh, I'm not even, where do we see with their, or is there a chat? I'm looking on my screen. Or do you have a chat function, Heather?
I do not.
There's
There's
no.
Q&A. I see Q&A section.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, there is not a chat, but if you click participants at the bottom of your screen, it'll populate a list, and there is a list of panelists and attendees. You'll be able to see the attendee names. So far, there are no questions.
Okay.
Are there any thoughts, any experiences that you've had, those of you who are participating, that as far as get the stakeholders and community involvement, have you had experiences in getting individuals involved in your organization or your cause?
I love something that Karen touched on about being authentic. And Karen is one of my favorite people, and partly because she is so authentic. But it's really easy to work with people who are authentic and always sort of themselves. So that's a really critical part of a relationship. I think as a human being, we're really finely attuned to people who are insincere, and there's something in our head that just sort of recoils a little bit at that insincerity. And so in building relationships with your agencies, with your donors, with your volunteers, love your mission and talk about your mission in a way that conveys to people that you love your mission. And I know you do, because, you know, we all are millionaires in social work. And so the compensating factors is that we get to do what we love and we get to make a difference in the world. And for me, I love working with people who love what they do. It makes it easy for me to catch the vision of what they're doing, and it makes it easy for me to love what they're doing. Even if it's not something that I had ever been passionate about. When you work with individuals that have that sincere passion, it's very addicting. It catches you a little bit because there's just like this transfer of energy or transfer of joy. And so as you're working on your elevator pitches, and I think most of us do have an elevator pitch for what we do, make sure that there's some room for spontaneity and make sure that there's some room for authenticity. But more than that, make sure that it really conveys the depth of the passion for what you do. All over the state. So I've been in, as we've all been in during COVID, meeting upon meeting upon meeting statewide, where we hear about the good things that people are doing and the collaborations that are happening in spite of, because of COVID. And it's very inspiring to me on a day-to-day basis to be around people who are so passionate about what they do. And I love, I'm gonna name drop because I just love some of these people. Peggy Green, oh my goodness. Like, I love being in meetings with her because she is so knowledgeable about her community. She is so knowledgeable about like what things are happening, what things need to be happening, and finding solutions. And she's just like amazing. If you guys know Pauline, oh my goodness, she knows everything about everything. And I love being in meetings with her because her passion, specifically her passion for working with children and children and youth experiencing homelessness, just like pops out at you. And even if you're not passionate about specifically working with that age group and homelessness, you can't help but walk away feeling like inspired to do more and do better coming out of a meeting that she's in. So I love these partnerships where people get to express the joy and the competence at what they're doing, because it inspires me to do a little bit better and try a little bit harder and be a little more excited about my day-to-day as well. I don't know if any people are on. So I don't know if any of these, I can't see the participant list, so I'm sorry if I embarrassed anybody that may be on. I don't know if you're on or not, so we'll just name drop.
You know, and that's what I like about our organization, and I appreciate our LHCC and Heather, appreciate Heather heading that up, because there's a spirit of cooperation there. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm pretty new to this field. I have not been involved in the social service field. Let's see, it was in March of 2013 is when I came on board, and there was a learning curve for me, and I have always really appreciated the collaboration that I see. And is in the last 3 years I've been executive director, and I've been able to see that on a broader scale. And I think COVID, as I've gotten more involved with on this more of a state level, seeing that COVID has brought in that it's almost like an extra boost of collaboration, whether it's because the funding that we receive, the additional funding, forces us to do it, forces us to it puts us all in the same room, and then we develop the relationships or whatever, however it does. I really have appreciated the collaboration I've experienced either with our own continuum of care and as well as at the state level.
So I think we've got about 10 minutes left. If there aren't any other questions, then we could probably end a little bit early because, you know, it's Friday.
It's Friday. It's probably the nap time kind of thing.
But we are very happy to take questions.
Yes.
It doesn't look like there are any questions, so I just want to take a moment and say thank you to you guys for presenting to us today. And thank you to all of our attendees for spending your Friday afternoon with us. We are grateful to all of you. Yeah, just thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Here's our contact information. There's Karen and mine if you have any questions that come up later, or if you want to collaborate. We like collaborating. And then also, I'm going to mention the credits, because I didn't PowerPoint. I found a template and it's super cute. So there is the credit for my PowerPoint template as well.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, and
thank you.
Have a great weekend.